Hello, and welcome to today's tutorial. Today we shall be painting a winged Tyranid hive tyrant, better known as a Flyrant. We'll be painting this in a variation on the default scheme of hive behemoth, utilizing gold patterning to create an eye-catching piece on tabletop. As you may have noticed, this is not the first time this particular model has seen paint. I received this model as part of a used package that included around 3,000 points of Tyranids, all of which were in various stages of assembly and/or painting. Specifically for this model, there are several bits missing, such as the spikes in the ribcage, the inner half of the spiracles in the back, and the extra claws in the hooves. When I first received this model, it was coated with 2 to 4 millimeters of paint. This was thick enough to cover many of the details on the model, and many of the various insets on the arms and legs were actually missing. To help remove the paint, I soaked it in purple powder for a long time. As I started soaking it, forgot about it, deployed, came home 9 months later, and found an interesting sludge of paint and purple powder and some random molds growing on the model. Ew. After cleaning it up and going at it again, this time with brake cleaner and stiff bristle brush, I managed to bring back most details in the model with relatively few scratches from the cleaning process. Here, we begin the pre-shading process shooting black paint at a near vertical angle from the bottom to emphasize the shadows. We will mirror this with white from the top to emphasize light coming down from above. This results in a high contrast pre-shade that our base shade will then take on to create dramatic shifts in tone with a single color. Because this was pre-assembled and had a severe excess of glue, I managed to break the arms several times while trying to remove them for magnetization. The small contact point that holds this to the base is no exception to this fact. I start off with the base attached to the model, as I very much dislike holding the model directly while working on it. But due to brush angles, I eventually ripped off and broke off the base so I could access the underside of this model much better. Typically, I would paint a model like this in completely unassembled form. This would allow me to use odd brush angles to be more precise in recessed areas. Also, a model this big is very unwieldy. The wingspan is about 9 inches across, and many times I was fighting with the limbs and the wings to paint visible parts that are between the body and the legs. When looking at the pinkish tan that the default behemoth scheme has, I decided it was way too light for darker colors that my army utilizes, so I chose what looks to me like a chocolatey brown. On the wide side of the wings appears to take on a milk chocolate hue, while in the shadows underneath it looks more like a dark chocolate. Yummy! I typically thin non-airbrush ready paints down in a 1-to-1 mixture of my own thinner, which is comprised of acrylic non-drying retardant, water, and alcohol. Because of the poor quality of the model's assembly, I decided to experiment with my painting techniques a little bit. Instead of doing my typical 3 shades of a single hue, I thinned all my paints down and applied a single hue, letting the pre-shading do all the work for me. Here, I am base coating the armored plates with black. I decided to test my skills with controlling the airbrush and chose not to mask off the rest of the model. I think I did pretty decent, but since I masked off the metal anyways later on, I should have done so for this step as well. As you can see, I use silly play to mask off the model. This technique is great, especially for organic and flowing models like most Tyranids, Legion Everblight, Chaos, and pretty much any non-humanoid armor you may end up playing. It can be tricky to work with, as it will seem to arbitrarily stick to some areas but slide right off of others. I like using my scalpel to help shape and cut the putty to the contours of various plates and seams in a model, but I have seen people be just as precise without resorting to using tools with this masking technique. My choice in blue was to give some kind of a shift in hue to emphasize the edges, since they were all solid black. In retrospect, I think it was a mistake, as it shifted more towards a purple than a blue that I was hoping for. Instead, I should have faded up to a dark gray and edge-lined with medium gray, as I have seen in other tutorials where black was the primary color. Since this is an experimental piece, I'm going to let it slide and see what other people think about it on the tabletop. Here, I'm cleaning up the overspray from the edge line on the plates. I diluted my paint down to 1:4 ratio of paint to airbrush thinner to allow it to fade into the bluish purple edge lining. I now go back and use a brush to tag the areas I could not get to with the airbrush. I'm using a 1:2 ratio of paint to airbrush thinner to give it enough transparency to allow the pre-shading to shift the hue in a similar manner as it did with the airbrush. As you can see, my technique with the paintbrush is pretty shaky. I make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of cleanup with it as well. Cleanup is very straightforward. I just take a clean brush, soaked in water, wipe it around where the paint dripped on the model that I didn't intend to be, and then I'll usually take my finger and wipe it up, or with a paper towel. It's fairly simple and almost always requires using a paper towel or finger to wipe it up. Occasionally, you get away with just using the brush with water to take care of the missed paint. Here I began the tedious task of doing some hand-painted filigree tribal patterns, whatever you want to call it. It's extremely time consuming, spent about an hour on this step alone, but it's worth it for centerpiece models such as this. What really makes this work is that I take the brush either from the center, with press it down hard and lightening it up as I bring it towards the outside, or I start from the outside, very light feather touch with maybe one thread touching the model, and bring it to the inside. I really enjoy using the liquid metal paints for this because they flow so easily that the slightest touch can produce paint on the model, allowing for extremely thin lines if you have the hand technique for it. Creating flowing organic lines is fairly difficult. You must keep the paintbrush moving at all times, not just in a linear fashion but also as you rotate it around. This is what produces the smooth flowing lines you see on the model. One of the keys to remember when doing this type of a branching organic structure is that as the branches feed into each other, it gets thicker. What we want to avoid is thick spots in the middle and thin parts at the end. It just looks not natural. When you do this technique right, you can pull off some pretty impressive tribal tree branch designs, and it really makes this model pop out as a centerpiece in the battlefield. Here, I hit up the cavities on the limbs with silver. Way back in 4th edition, when I rediscovered 40k, I thought of these critters as biomechanical beings, and therefore the cavities should be looking into the metal underworkings of the Tyranids. Fast forward 4 years later, and I'm still following the same color choices, albeit executed on a much better level. I decided to go with just straight white on the teeth. This is because we'll be coming back with a wash that will stain and shift the hue of the teeth to something that's not quite so unnatural looking. Before I gloss coat the model for the primary wash, I decided to wash all the silver bits with Secret Weapon Miniatures Armor Wash. Doing this before the gloss coat helps it coat the raised areas better and create a more dramatic shift in shade when applied to a glossy surface. For the adrenal glands, or the Norn crown I suppose, I went with a bright green. Now for my favorite step, the gloss coat, which means I'm almost done with this project. Gloss coating before washing is very important, as it helps the wash flow into the cracks in a much tighter manner than without the gloss coat, which allows you to create very crisp edges. As you can see, this goes on rather light purple looking, but the wash lives up to its name and will dry in a reddish black color, with purple only showing its thinnest of areas. Because we gloss coated this, all these recessed details are just soaking up the wash. Unlike a typical oil wash, this is water-based, and therefore will beat up somewhat thicker than an oil-based one. This difference can make some adjustment to your application style for washes, but it's not too difficult to work around. Just a little bit more pushing and pulling with a paintbrush than you would typically expect to be coming out of a wash. And that's it. After the washes were applied, I matte coated the entire model and put it on a basic flock and rock base. Despite what felt like a rush job on my part, this model took around 3 hours of painting time, and that's not including cleaning the airbrush between colors and drying times for both the gloss and matte coats. For a model this big, that's typically a centerpiece for an army, I think this is an appropriate amount of time, and even probably on the lower end of the time scale. Had I been working on a brand new kit straight from the package, I probably would have employed more time-consuming techniques, such as a 3-color shading for both the brown, black, and red, as well as edge lining, and I definitely would have spent a lot more time on the freehand filigree on armored plates. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.